As we all await to be surprised by DeMarcus Riddick's non-commitment to Alabama on Wednesday, let's go ahead and get back into Jimmy Stein's countdown. What do you say about that?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. Jimmy, I really screwed up that beginning, but that's okay. I mean, just like we're going to screw up by not getting to Marcus Riddick Wednesday, but we'll talk about that later. We don't know it yet. We don't know. Go ahead.
It's training camp, so, it's training camp. It's not football season, so it's okay that you're not in game shape just yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. We are going to talk about your countdown some more, though, today. First of all, thank you for making us your first listen. Appreciate that so much. Let's start off with Jamarion Miller. I've taken, he's gone from Jamarion to Jam, now to Jam on It. People may not remember the hit single Jam on It by Nucleus, but I do. It's one of the best, most underrated rap songs of all time. Fight your mama on that one. But Jam Miller, one of, he's a crowd favorite. And look here, Jimmy, I found this picture. Does that not look exactly like Bobby Humphrey? I mean, it's not just the number 26. Like, that looks like Bobby Humphrey running the football.
I'm sure that's partly number 26 as to why we feel that way. But Jam's a really good player. I think we all got a glimpse last season in his true freshman season. He was really just playing garbage time snaps. He didn't really play a ton with the first team, maybe a little bit, but you had Jahmyr Gibbs, you had Jace McClellan, you had Roydell Williams. I think Justice Haynes and Richard Young are going to see the same situation this fall, where they're the new guys. They have a lot to learn. Initially, they're going to be behind the others. But Jam Miller is now a little bit of a veteran. He's been in the program for a year. Really showed out this spring. He's a different back than Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams. A little more powerful. Now, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he runs big. He's a better inside runner. He's going to be much better at moving the chains than Jace. To me, he's sort of in the middle, right? He's sort of a little bit of Jace in terms of his speed and burst, but he's also a little bit of Roydell Williams, who's a tougher back inside. So I think Jam's a good kind of combo of those two. I think we're going to see a ton of Jam. I know that the fans are super excited about Justice Haynes. It's always the shiny new freshman toy that gets everybody excited the most. But let me tell you, Justice is going to have to go through Jam Miller to get carries. And I think Jam's going to be a big part of things this fall. And it might be a situation where his touches look a little different in November than they do in September, because I think initially you're going to go with Jace and Roydell, right? I mean, the veterans that have played, they're both good players. There's no doubt Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams are good players. But, I do think as the season moves along, Jam Miller and Justice Haynes both will cut into their carries and maybe by the end of the year be running back one and running back two. I just don't dismiss Jace. I think Jace is a little underrated by the fan base in terms of how good he is. But nevertheless, hey, if you don't have a Bobby Humphrey that you mentioned too early, if you don't have a running back like that, the next best thing is to have a committee of highly capable backs. Alabama has that at minimum. And I'm just excited about the group as a whole, to say nothing of Jam Miller, who may prove to be the most gifted of the bunch.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm also with you on your Jace McClellan take. As you know, I talked to a friend of mine today with some connections, and he actually talked about how, look, everybody's talking about Justice Haynes, rightfully so. The first thing he said was he feels pretty good about all five running backs playing at least early until we get a feel for what's going to happen. I mean, that includes Richard Young, Jam Miller, Jace, Roydell, and Justice. So what a collection of names, by the way. That's awesome. But he said Jace McClellan has been looking at this like a contract year. Like, here's a chance for him to really step it up and in workouts and just an overall team attitude, he's picked it up a notch. So
here's a little bit of scoop too. I know one person who likes Jace McClellan a lot. Now, nothing serious. I'm not spoiling anything here because, nothing's been announced or will be for months. But I do know from comments that he's made publicly and elsewhere. But Jim Nagy with the Senior Bowl liked Jace McClellan a ton. And people might be a little surprised to hear that. But let's remember, in modern football, and by modern, I mean, post 2000, in modern football, the running back position and the Senior Bowl don't mix well, right? Because you have to be a senior to play in the Senior Bowl. And as we all know, most running backs with a pulse that have any chance of playing in the NFL already leave after their junior years. Most running backs. Now, Alabama's been fortunate, and Alabama's had a lot of good ones that have played senior years, like Brian Robinson, Najee Harris, and now Jace McClellan. But see, I would include Jace with those other guys because Jace is a very talented kid for a senior running back. I don't think you're going to see him on many lists of, hey, here's one of the top 10 or 12 running backs in the country. But I'll guarantee you'll see him on a list of, here's the best senior running backs in the country. Jace listed as a senior in year 4 at Alabama, so he'll be eligible for the Senior Bowl in January. I just have a personal expectation of he will be invited there, even if he loses out carries to Justice Haynes and Jamarion Miller. Jace is a good player, and I think he does have a pro future. Probably not a first-round type pick, to be honest, but I think his ceiling is day 2, and he's such a good receiver out of the backfield, Luke. I think it could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many running backs are day 1 guys anymore. I mean, it's pretty doggone rare. Yeah, I mean, they'll take a chance on the Saquon Barkley, but they're worried that, unfortunately, that'll be a Trent Richardson. And, there's all this talk in NFL circles right now about running backs are extremely upset about the contracts they're getting, which is understandable, but it's become all this platoon stuff, which makes me wonder if you're a running back, if you're like a pretty doggone good running back, would you start entertaining the idea of moving to linebacker or something like that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a funny conversation. I know this is Locked on Bama, not Locked on NFL, but by far the most interesting development in my mind in the NFL in the past 7 days was a Zoom call between all of the premier running backs in the NFL. Apparently got on a Zoom call, all of them. I'm talking about Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, not just the Alabama guys. A lot of premier NFL running backs got on a Zoom call with representatives from the NFLPA, and it's almost like they're forming a union within their union. I mean, they're like, hey, I know y'all represent the union as a whole, but we feel as a position we're getting hosed here, and y'all or somebody has to stand up for us because as a group we don't like how we're treated. And boy, wouldn't that be something if on a week before the season every employed running back in the NFL went, you know what, we're not playing anymore. Now, that's not going to happen, but it is unprecedented to my knowledge, Luke, that players from multiple, if not all 32 teams, got on a Zoom call that was position specific, complaining to the NFLPA that, hey, we don't like how we're being treated by management. And I understand it, but I also think it might be the reality of the sport in 2023.
Speaking of reality, if you're getting real about car parts, then you got to go check out eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that part will fit or your money back. Just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game at no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. On the next Locked on Bama, we'll be, right back in Jimmy's wheelhouse with his countdown. And we're going to continue said countdown right now with number 50 in your program, number 1 in your heart. That's Tim Smith. Actually, that's not him. That's him. Tim Smith seen here wearing a child's national championship hat. Yeah, that's Tim Smith right there, number 50. and looking good, man.
Yeah, Tim, the first thing that comes to mind for me, talking about Tim Smith, I've ranked him 17th on the team, as the 17th best player on this roster going into 2023. And maybe that might be high for some folks who's like, wait a minute, Tim Smith hadn't done a whole lot yet to justify that ranking. So this is a bit of a projection. But one thing I've noticed over the past several years at Nick Saban's Alabama, not every year, it's not like you can set your watch to it, but most years, an older defensive lineman who's been a contributing player, who's been playing in his final year at Alabama, the light really comes on. Byron Young was like that maybe in his last 2 seasons at Alabama. Phil Mathis was like that, moving all the way up to a day 2 selection. Christian Barmore was like that in his final year at Alabama. So a lot of older defensive linemen have taken that next and final step they needed to prove to the NFL, really, that they're quality NFL players. And I'm not saying Tim Smith is going to all of a sudden in front of our eyes blossom into a first-round pick or anything like that. But I do think Tim Smith has shown enough to this point where we can be really optimistic that this year's defensive lineman that's going to really move to the next level for us is number 50, Tim Smith. Played right away as a freshman. Played more as a sophomore. Last year was a regular starter. The knock on him really is just consistency. I would say about almost once a game. He plays a lot of snaps, and maybe once a game you go, wow, nice, Tim Smith, that was good, right? But you're saying it once a game or twice a game at the most. And sometimes he's just out there and he's all right, but he's not really impactful. He can be. We've seen the flashes, but hey, it's common for the big guys that play in the trenches. It's common. It's a developmental sport. Most of them are not Quinnen Williams, who got dramatically better from one year to the next. Most of them just take one step of progression in the way. And I think Tim Smith is just one step away from being a high quality, maybe second team, all SEC type, maybe a 3rd round pick. But hey, the 3rd round pick in the NFL draft's a good player, your top 100 player. One of the things I say all the time about the draft that's funny to me and fans, in terms of how fans view things, when we're recruiting a top 100 prospect nationally, some kid that's ranked, 78th in the country, but he's in the top 100. As fans, we can't wait to sign that guy. We get like, wow, what a prospect. He's number 78 in the whole country. We've got to sign that guy. And then we have players that come to Alabama and they cycle out of the program, and they're projected 3rd round picks, which would go, right around the 78th best NFL prospect. So you go in the 3rd round, and as fans would go, yeah, well, he was okay. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. You want them to cycle in top 100, and if they leave top 100, that's really good. So I think Tim Smith kind of fits that profile. He was a top 100 recruit when he got here. I think he can be a top 100 guy when he leaves. But it's going to take one more step in his progression. He hasn't been a 3rd round pick yet, but I think he can be.
Yeah, honestly, Jimmy, I'm glad you said at the very beginning, feels like that's high. Not high in terms of expectation. I think that we as fans believe Tim Smith has all this talent. I mean, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, he made one play that opened everybody's eyes. I can't even remember what game it was. It wasn't a.
It was a I remember 4th down play against Ole Miss.
That's what it was.
It's been Bryant Denny, and it was Ole Miss like 1st or 2nd possession, and they're driving, and hey, it's going to be a ball game. It was Lane Kiffin's hope you brought your popcorn game, when Lane said, hey, bring your popcorn. And then Alabama starts immediately kicking his butt. Well, in that 1st or 2nd possession, they drove down the field, had a 4th and 1 at about Alabama's 15-yard line, and they went for it with a running play, and Tim Smith just blew it up. And that sort of led to an onslaught of good things for Alabama. And that's a great hey, look, if you can make that play against that opponent in that situation, you're a good player. He's just got to learn as he ages that, hey, this is the effort for all 40 of the 50 snaps you play, and not just consistently flash, not just inconsistently flash.
Yeah, and I can see then that's why you'd have him so high, if like you keep remembering that play. But in terms of what's actually been brought to the table, I do feel like that's high. But again, hey, it's your list. If I want a list, I'll make it. Anyway, Jimmy, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to jump right into Seth McLaughlin. There's got to be another way to say that. And we're back. So now I'm going to put up this picture of Seth here, and that's a good picture of him. He doesn't look like Tim Smith at all. And so you've got him pretty high on this list too, if you ask me. I mean, look, are we 100% sure Seth's going to start?
I'm nearly 100% sure. I mean, he was a starter all 15 practices at center. It was not a situation this spring where they said, okay, Seth, you're going to be the center. Sometimes Darian, you're going to be the center. Sometimes they looked at some other guys because you got to get somebody ready. Seth could be hurt. He's been injured part of the last 2 seasons. So they got other guys that could potentially play there, but I'm confident Seth's going to be the every game starting center. He is in year 3 now of being a center for at least a portion of the season. I won't go over his whole career looking back, but this is the reason I ranked him as high as 16. Again, that might be high for some folks, but I look at Seth McLaughlin like, hey, the next progression for him, and I think he's slightly more on track than Tim Smith for this. This is why I have him 1 slot ahead of Tim Smith. The next progression for Seth is just performing like an all-SEC player, and I think he's close. I think he was good this spring. Again, he's in year 4. This will be his 3rd year starting games at center. Real smart kid, hard worker, the typical stereotypical blue-collar center. But this is why I really like him in terms of why I think he might be heading towards all SEC. I doubt if you notice this, but last year when he finally won the position for good, and it took about 6 games into the season before him and Darian Dalcourt were splitting snaps. Darian got hurt again. Seth was put in, and he started the last 8 games. Even though Dalcourt came back, even though Dalcourt could have played because he was healthy enough to play, it was just Seth's spot for the final 8 games. And in those 8 games that Seth McLaughlin started to end last season, Luke, 4 of those 8 games, he was named a staff player of the week. He actually led the offensive lineman in being named staff player of the week. Not Tyler Booker, not J.C. Latham. It was Seth McLaughlin. And he did it in 4 of his 8 starts. So, and he came into this spring with like, hey, are you going to be splitting time with Darian Dalcourt again? No. Seth was a first-team center, practice 1 all the way through practice 15. And again, with the starters on A-Day. So he's a 4th-year guy, very experienced, very smart. I would say the most interesting thing to me about Seth, Luke, is, and we'll be discussing this a whole heck of a lot in November, he'll have a really interesting COVID decision to make. Because even though he's listed as a senior on the roster, and this will be his 3rd year as a starter, and I'm sure the NFL is going to give him a long look this year, as every starter at Alabama gets, I think Seth could probably use another year of strength and size gains, because that's always been the knock on Seth is, okay, how big is he? How strong is he? Another year could help that. I won't be shocked if Seth McLaughlin, even though listed as a senior, returns in 2024, elects to use that COVID year and actually plays a 5th year. If he does, Luke, he'll be starting. He'll be a starter for a 4th year. That's very rare in the Saban era, because most kids that start 3 years, they're all in the NFL, right? So it'll be really interesting if Seth returns.
It's rare for any era in the last 20 years, I'd say. Anybody,
correct.
Anything, right?
Correct.
So I don't mean to put you on the spot. 2 things. First of all, so then, all right, with McLaughlin here, we haven't done J.C. Latham yet. Obviously, he's still to come on the countdown. He could be number 1 for all I know.
He's up there.
And then I don't know who else along the offensive line. Have we done everybody but him?
We have not gotten to Tyler Booker.
Tyler Booker.
Okay. So Seth is the 3rd highest ranked offensive lineman on the countdown. Booker and J.C. Latham are to come at some point. Let's not give it away. This is an Oppenheimer level suspense story.
So then what is your starting offensive line from left to right?
I think game 1 against Middle Tennessee, it's going to be Elijah Pritchett at left tackle, Darian Dalcourt at left guard, Seth at center, Tyler Booker at right guard, and J.C. Latham at right tackle. And I think by midseason, Caden Proctor will be the left tackle, and Elijah Pritchett will be one of the better 6th men in the league. I just think Proctor, the superstar freshman from Iowa, is just going to be too good to keep out of the lineup. And as soon as the staff deems him ready, probably Elijah to the bench, maybe Dalcourt. That would take a position change for probably Pritchett, unless they want to elevate TJ Ferguson, who's another guy who could make a run at the starting 5. But But no, I think those will be the 5 for Middle Tennessee, and at some point Proctor takes over. Maybe Proctor beats out Pritchett in fall camp. That could happen. It's just my experience is that with true freshmen, most of the time, there will be exceptions. Most of the time, it's going to take a game or two before they become starters. Now, I think Caleb Downs is going to be out there, play one, snap one, but he's a unicorn.
So does it worry you at all? I mean, I'm looking at these three, and I know we're in the teens. I don't know exactly where we are on the countdown. You tell me.
We're at Seth McLaughlin is 16, Tim Smith 16. Is 17, okay. And Jam Miller is 18.
We're right in the middle of the teens here, right in the formative years. And so does it worry you at all? Like we're talking about Tim Smith, Seth McLaughlin, and Jam Miller, and we're all like, I wonder if they're a little high. I mean, yeah, they all have this nice potential. You know, we all feel like they've done pretty well, especially when it comes, I would say, of this group, of this threesome. People are probably the highest on Jam Miller. But they feel like maybe Tim Smith has the highest ceiling, and then Seth probably the most experience.
I can see that. What I would say in terms of a negative to guys like them being ranked this high, because this is ranked. I mean, you're once you're well inside the top 22, right? We're talking about guys that are out there with the first team, almost all the snaps, and these aren't all-star players yet. Although I think Jam Miller can be a superstar. He's just young. He just hadn't had a chance. And I think Tim Smith is an NFL player, and I think Seth McLaughlin will end his career at Alabama as sort of a second-team All-SEC guy, which is pretty good. So they're all good. But, in terms of the negative, or where I would go negative is, I've said this before, and this is kind of hard to follow, but I don't think 1 through 22, this is one of Saban's best teams, to be honest, or at least in terms of how we're looking at it today. Things can change. If Jam Miller looks like a first-round pick and he's Saquon Barkley, we might be saying something different, right? But I don't know that 1 through 22, this team is one of Coach Saban's best.
Yeah.
I do think 1 through 85, it might be his best. The depth on this team, the depth of options and the depth of quality bodies is ridiculously high. But there are fewer proven stars going into the season than normal. And I think that's one of the things this countdown that we don't do just to kill the silly season, right? Killing the off season. We do the countdown as a way to, hey, this is a great way to look at the roster in terms of, like Luke was pointing out. I mean, how many offensive linemen are left? You're at 16. Are there any offensive linemen that were ranked higher than the 16th best players on the team? If you look at that at all 22 positions, you can kind of see where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are. But you do see that there is, with this group, a lack maybe of proven stars. Saban's teams have brought back more year to year than this particular season. But again, that's just because they're not proven doesn't mean they won't be stars. And Jam Miller is an excellent example of that. We might be looking at him completely different than we look at him right now.
That's going to do it for today's podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with more countdown stuff. One other thing I want to throw in there, by the way, the NFL is doing that top 100 players in the NFL, and Devontae Smith is number 100. So kudos for him for sneaking in that 100. I wanted to say that when you talked about, when you talk about the top 100 players, you're so excited. He's one of the top 100 players in the NFL. That's a big deal. So it should be celebrated. So anyway, my main man, Devontae Smith. Anywho, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We'll be back next time with more countdown. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.